Thursday. Now, that doesn't last long because it will turn cloudier from mid-morning and outbreaks of increasingly heavy and persistent rain will spread into southern coastal counties through the day. That could cause some issues given the saturated ground at the moment. But further north, we've got the sunshine remaining across North Wales, North Midlands, East Anglia. Showers for Scotland and Northern Ireland, Northern England as well. And Friday, again, is a showery day. The worst of the showers will be across eastern and western coasts, in between some sunny spells. And as we go into the weekend, high pressure builds. That means drier, but it also means colder with temperatures falling away.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Dewbs & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Well, good evening to you. The longest strike in the history of the NHS has started today as junior doctors take part in a 6-day walkout. I'm asking, when will this all end? And how should it end? Who should blink first? And tensions in the Middle East really are rising. Meanwhile, Tony Blair has denied suggestions that he is taking on a role in the Israel-Gaza conflict. I'm asking a simple question. Should Tony Blair ever be involved in any capacity in any foreign conflicts? You tell me. And Labour are apparently considering plans to offer tax cuts if they win the next election in order to show that they are the party of aspiration. Yes! Are they? You tell me. And a TV drama about the Post Office Horizon scandal has gripped many of us. But of course, the saddest thing is the story is true. So postmasters had their lives, their reputations, their finances, their mental health absolutely ruined. But do you think anyone truly has been held accountable? Yeah, well, we're going to have some pretty robust debate across all of that with Aaron Bastani and Peter Hitchens. But before we get stuck in, let's cross live for tonight's latest news headlines.
Michelle, thank you. Good evening. Well, there's been another yellow weather warning for heavy rain on its way for tomorrow after Storm Henk battered parts of the UK last night. The West Midlands Ambulance Service today warned people to take extra care after several people were caught in flooding and had to be rescued from their cars. Parts of Birmingham, Leicester and Northampton have been flooded today. One family was left terrified more than 400 feet in the air while riding the London Eye. Strong winds ripped the door off. Meanwhile, a 50-year-old man was killed by a tree as which fell on his car whilst he was driving in Gloucestershire. There's more rain on the way. People are being warned to expect more travel disruption tomorrow. Doctors have warned that medical professionals may vanish from the NHS unless pay is dramatically improved. 6 days of industrial action began this morning after talks between the government and the BMA broke down. Some of those striking have warned that countries, including Australia, have been targeting them with advertising in an attempt to attract British doctors to overseas jobs. Junior doctors want a 35% pay rise, which they say would restore their real earnings to levels seen in 2008. The government says that's unaffordable, but insists the door remains open for further negotiations. A 15-year-old boy has been arrested on suspicion of murder following a stabbing in North London on New Year's Eve. 16-year-old Harry Pittman died following what police say was an altercation as a crowd gathered on Primrose Hill to watch fireworks. Posting on social media, his sister described him as a good boy with a heart of gold. A convicted killer who refused to reveal where he'd hidden the body of his victim has died in jail while serving a life sentence. Scott Walker was jailed in 2021 for the murder of 17-year-old Bernadette Walker. It's understood she referred to him as her father, although they weren't related. She was murdered in 2020 after accusing him of sexually abusing her over a number of years. He died in prison in December without ever revealing the location of her body. A spokesperson for the prison service said their thoughts are with the victim's family. There have been 2 explosions at a memorial ceremony in Iran, killing more than 100 people. Iranian state television showed footage of crowds running as ambulances rushed to the scene. Officials described it as a terrorist attack as people gathered to commemorate the death of a senior commander 4 years ago. So far, no one has claimed responsibility. Here in the UK, more young people are making the switch to non-alcoholic drinks. A study carried out by YouGov found 44% of those aged 18 to 24 consider themselves to be either occasional or regular drinkers of alcohol alternatives. That's up from 31% in 2022. It also found younger generations are now the most sober age group, with 39% preferring not to drink at all. That's after a survey in November found 1 in 10 British drinkers felt they had an unhealthy relationship with alcohol. The Princess Royal is to make an official visit to Sri Lanka next week, marking 75 years of British diplomacy. Princess Anne is due to be joined by her husband on a 3-day visit, and that comes as the King and Queen are expected to journey to Canada in May, followed by Australia, New Zealand and Samoa later in the year. And lastly, Eurostar has been given a warning by the advertising watchdog after promoting special fares that were available to very few people. The train company invited customers to soak up every second of summer with a European getaway for just £39. But the Advertising Standards Authority found only a very small portion of seats available at that price, describing the promotion, therefore, as misleading. Eurostar says it takes complaints seriously and says it won't happen again. That's the news on GB News, across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker. This is Britain's News Channel.
Thanks for that, Polly. I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm with you right through till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, I've got the columnist for the Daily Mail, Peter Hitchens, and the co-founder of Novara Media, Aaron Bastani. Good evening, gents, and Happy New Year to both of you.
Happy New Year. Happy Christmas.
Happy Christmas. There you
Still
go.
Christmas.
Well, actually, it's pretty shocking how quick we move on from Christmas, isn't it? Like our morning, look at that void there where there was once a beautiful Christmas tree.
We should still be there.
We whip it all down, don't we? We move on.
It's not to 12th night yet.
Well, there you go. Are you one of those people that keep your tree up for the 12th night? Are you someone... I put mine up in November. I mean, heaven forbid what you think about that, Peter.
That's great.
Tip you over the edge.
I love Christmas trees. Put it up when you like.
Well, is yours still up? Could you wait to get it down? You get in touch and tell me, have you got Easter eggs in your local shop? That was the latest thing I saw reported. What is going on in this crazy society that we live in? Get in touch with all your thoughts on everything tonight. There's a lot going on, of course, as well in the Middle East. You've just been hearing some of that in the bulletin. I want to unpick some of that with my panel tonight, but also ask Tony Blair, do you think he should have a role at all in any capacity in any of the stuff that's going on over in the Middle East? I can tell you now, some of you have got very strong opinions on that. My inbox is on fire on that particular topic already. But for now, we know what's going on, don't we, today? Again, the junior doctors are on strike. This time, though, apparently the longest strike in NHS history. I think it's 6 days, this one. What we're going to do about it all then? Who needs to blink first? Is it the junior doctors? Is it the government? All of these kind of pay restoration back to 2008. Is that reasonable? And are you still with them? One of the first emails I got tonight was from a viewer, Sue, saying, I am 100% behind the doctor, she says. Their wage, as they're paid right now, is disgraceful. She says even putting them up to £20 an hour as basic is not enough for the work that they do. Are you with Sue? Are you still backing them? Peter, where are you on it all?
Well, my main sentiment is that doctors should never go on strike. Whatever their case is, whether it's good or bad, whatever the circumstances are, doctors should not ever go on strike. It's, if they wanted to go on strike, they should not have tried to become doctors. It's quite clear to me that if your trade is, or your profession is in the giving of mercy, that you can never withhold it. And to go on strike is to withhold mercy, and it's simply fundamentally, straightforwardly, unquestionably wrong. Therefore, I cannot support it. And whatever the case may be, I'm not interested. The strike is wrong, and that's that.
So how do they get their worth, then, financially?
Well, there are many, many ways of persuading people to pay more, and actually very few people in their lives have ever been on strike. I've been a member of a trade union since I first started full-time work in 1973. I've been on strike during that period for 18 hours, and a futile waste of time it was, I have to say. It's not necessary to go on strike if you have intelligent leaders and the intelligent people on the other side of the negotiating table. These things don't have to happen. Strikes, I was an industrial correspondent covering strikes for years and years of my life in the 1970s and early 1980s. Not one of those strikes was unavoidable. But in those cases, at least the people who went on strike were free to do so, because what they did was not so essential as mercy. Doctors simply should not go on strike, and the police also cannot go on strike. They're not allowed to. They're not particularly badly paid. And there was a lot of effort made in the time when I was an industrial correspondent to deal with the problem of firemen who had their pay had gone badly wrong, and they ended up being paid a lot better. And after that, it was even more unreasonable for them to strike. But they should really be in the category of people who shouldn't strike. I'm not saying people should be banned from striking. I hate banning people from doing anything. I just think it should be self-evident, if you were a doctor, that you don't go on strike. And if you don't, say if you don't want to be a doctor, don't be a doctor. But if you be a doctor, don't go on strike.
Aaron, do you agree?
Well, Peter said if you have intelligent leadership on one side and intelligent leadership on the other, then you don't need to strike. Of course, those are very big ifs.
Sure.
In a perfect world, I mean, I perhaps would agree, but we aren't in that world, sadly. And what I would say is that Rishi Sunak, when he became Prime Minister, had some big targets. Stopping boat crossings, inflation, interest rates, but also getting NHS waiting lists down. When he made that promise, when he outlined that target, he knew full well that junior doctors and people across the NHS would be going on industrial action, and that would be a problem for those targets. For waiting lists to come down, you need to basically pacify that part of the NHS workforce. You can agree or disagree with whether they're justified or not, but that's a prerequisite. And now what we're seeing is no real movement from the government. This is clearly going to make waiting lists longer. And I feel like the government is saying, oh, well, actually, look, we're not going to be able to get waiting lists down, but that's because the junior doctors are on strike. Well, we knew the industrial action was there in the first place. You made that pledge. You're not coming good on it. So...
Well, they offered an extra 3%, didn't they?
Yeah. I mean,
so there has been movement. And what the government is saying now, Victoria Atkins would say, well, actually, we're not going to get back around the negotiation table whilst you're on strike. So if you stop the strikes, we'll sit back down again.
Well, they've made that promise. And on inflation, their promise seems to be coming good. On small boats, not coming good. On NHS waiting lists, I think it also won't be coming good. So, look, it depends on how you read this. Politically, it makes total sense from my perspective for them to give the junior doctors what they want. They've probably got one more year left.
So you'd give them, what, 35%?
Well, no, I think in terms of the short term... So what they want is pay restoration to 2010 levels, but not all in one go.
It's 2008 levels, back to 2008.
Yeah, 2000...
It's about 35%, isn't
it? Well, it depends. I think it depends, but broadly that's correct. 25 to 35%, isn't it? Yeah. They don't want it all in one go. And the costings I've seen have been around £1 billion in terms of short term. Now, you might say, well, short term isn't good enough. From a political calculus point of view, of course it is. You have a general election this year. What I find really interesting is that the Tories aren't going down that road, and I do think that's going to harm the general election. In a way, you might think, good, they're thinking about the long term. But I am surprised. When you think about, for instance, what's happened with the RMT, with the rail, for instance, we had no big rail strikes this winter. That's because the Tories knew a winter this year, like last year, would just look so bad for them electorally. I wonder why they're looking at this a little bit differently.
But, so, I mean, it's not just about pay either, is it? So pay, of course, is one of the big facets of this, but they also are talking about things like you've got these peer review bodies now, so they want to almost, I would say, summarise it by dismantling that and changing the way that those review bodies happen. They also want some kind of guarantees to protect against inflation going forward. And if you give in to this collection as a government, so you give this one particular collection, you know what, let's go back in time to 2008. Many of you, by the way, perhaps joined the profession since that point and were happy with your salary beyond that, but anyway, if you do that for the junior doctors, then the next time pay reviews come around for all the other segments, they're going to go, well, hang on a second, because now we want our pay restoring to X, Y and Z dates.
That's precisely what I'm not suggesting, though, because you're absolutely right. You create all sorts of problems elsewhere in the labour market. What I'm saying is it's more an observation, Michelle. In the short term, I'm just surprised that the Tories aren't just trying to settle down a little bit of a fire, because we have a general election this year. It is a surprise to me. You had two big parts of the labour market last year, rail workers and the NHS, on industrial action. It was causing them an electoral headache. It makes people feel the country isn't being run properly. That's expressed in opinion polling, 7 days a week, 365 days a year right now. And it's surprising to me they aren't trying to put this fire out purely as a matter of electoral expediency, if nothing else. I am surprised.
How much of this do you think is political?
Well, it must be political because it's a National Health Service and the government ultimately controls this. It could have, I don't speak for the government and wouldn't dream of trying to do so, but it could be that it crosses their mind that many members of the public will look at this and say, well, it's not the government that's causing the strike, it's the junior doctors, and their claim is outrageous. I couldn't demand a 35% pay rise. I can't get what I used to be paid in 2008. Why should they? And many of them will feel, as I do, that doctors in any case shouldn't strike. And it's a simple thing. It's one of those jobs where when you sign up to do it, you understand that striking is not an option. So why are they now resorting to this method of getting a pay increase, which, if they did get it, much of which would pretty much be swallowed up in inflation anyway? You can't reform the world by pay increases. It's something that people take time to learn, but it's undoubtedly true.
Adrian is making the point about hypocrisy. One of my viewers, he's saying that he thinks MPs have got a bit of an audacity when it comes to suppressing wage increases. Adrian's calculated it back. He's saying that they've had about a 40% pay increase, MPs. So he's saying that there's a double standard there.
I think that's right. And in addition to that, what Peter's saying, I think, misses a really crucial point, which is many of these doctors are, junior doctors are leaving, health professionals are leaving the UK. We have a 45,000 shortfall on nurses, around 100,000 in the NHS, generally speaking. I remember a very good proposal from maybe one day PM Dewbs, who was saying...
Careful what you wish for.
Who said... It was a very interesting proposal, which is to say that you won't pay tuition fees, you won't have student debt.
But you get locked in.
10 years, say, right? Or we can discuss numbers. I think 10 years seems reasonable. That seems very sensible to me. That's the kind of thing that I would like to see. You know, I don't support tuition fees, student debt, and I understand that's a huge debate, but I think we have to start with these guys because they're so critical to how this country runs. And, of course, they have to give something in return, like promising to stay in the country and serving the NHS for 10 years.
But I've never understood why don't we lock in that personnel into things like the NHS? Why aren't you physically... If we're going to train you to be a part of our wonderful health service when it works... why aren't you have to be there? You're tied in via your contracts, whether it's via your loan repayments and some terms around that or whatever.
Well, I suppose it's because it's a free country and we haven't tended to resort to this kind of thing. We've tended to rely on people realising they've been given a benefit by getting this extremely valuable training and that as a result they have obligations. It's true, the fewer obligations people have, the more you have to force them to do things by making such rules. But I'd be very sorry if we became the kind of country which made that sort of rule.
Do you know, I'm just looking at you guys. I would say that there was a mixed bag in terms of who... I told you I started the programme with the viewer Sue that was basically saying that she completely supports them. Lee says the junior doctors are disgraceful. They keep mentioning their basic rate of pay, essentially, is what he's saying. But, of course, they get lots of top-ups and add-ons for working nights, bank holidays, weekends or whatever it is. He says he regards them as spoilt brats. That's a bit harsh. Bridget says, I would have more respect for the strikes if they were holding the government to ransom over an overhaul of the service, but to demand just money for their job in the NHS. She says it's absolutely abhorrent. Why did they join the NHS if it wasn't to try and make things better for everybody? Again, echoed by Lorraine, saying that the junior doctors are not taking things out on the government, they're taking them out on us, the vulnerable, the sick, the frail, their patients. She says, I've lost respect for the junior doctors. They should not ever strike. Which side of the fence are you on? And where is your limit? Do you think that 35% or there or thereabouts is reasonable? And what would happen going forward to the other professions if that was indeed granted to the junior doctors? And how would we afford all of this? You get in touch and you tell me after the break. A man that's got many of you talking already, Tony Blair. You know, he pops up everywhere, doesn't he? Well, now there's been rumours that he was very quick to dismiss, I have to say, about a potential involvement in the Israel-Gaza conflict. Tensions in the Middle East really are escalating. Should Tony Blair be anywhere near foreign conflict in any capacity? You tell me.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Earlier with Eamon and Isabel.
Junior doctors across England have begun the longest ever NHS strike, which is going to last 6 days.
And the government have this on their side where they talk about budgets and they talk about figures and they look at you and they say, greedy, greedy, greedy.
We're going to keep striking until we get a credible offer that we're able to put to our members and our members accept.
It's one story, isn't it? Luke Little, a 16-year-old darts prodigy. I've never seen so much interest in a darts world final as tonight. He plays Luke Humphreys.
So I've also introduced his own kebab. It's called Luke the Nuke Special Wrap, I think it is.
Imagine if we had Storm Cooper today. Storm Shepherd.
We've got Storm Eamon instead.
Storm, lot of rubbish. Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
Hello there, welcome back. Michelle Dewberry till 7, the columnist for the Daily Mail, Peter Hitchens, and the co-founder of Novara Media, Aaron Bastani, alongside me. The conversation about the junior doctor strikes continues to rumble on and does divide you guys at home. Keep your thoughts on that one coming in. But for now, I shall move on because there is an awful lot happening in and around the Middle East. You might have seen some of that update in our news bulletin. Also, as well, you'll be familiar with the fact that Hamas's deputy leader apparently was killed in an airstrike. I'm not sure anyone has currently claimed responsibility for that, but notwithstanding it, tensions are bubbling and bubbling. None other than Tony Blair. Many of you, some of the emails I cannot read out to you guys at this time of the day, but Tony Blair, now there were suggestions that perhaps he was going to be playing some kind of role in the Israel-Gaza conflict, particularly around helping Gazans leave Gaza. I have to say that was very quickly dismissed by the Tony Blair Institute. It was said that that was basically a lie and wasn't happening at all. There's a lot to unpick here. We'll get into the aspects of the Middle East and what's potentially going to happen there and the consequences and how involved the UK should be. But for now, Tony Blair, should he be anywhere, in any level, any capacity involved in foreign conflict?
He should be entering a Trappist monastery where he vows never to say another word again for the rest of his life and spends his time praying for forgiveness. I don't really see that somebody who made such a complete mess of his main foreign policy adventure should be taken seriously ever again, or should be asked for his advice, or should be treated as if he was an important player in any of these matters. Time for him to fall silent for good. The Middle East is littered with corpses, and columns of refugees still walk across it thanks to the war that he and George W. Bush created. And I just don't think there's anything further to be said by him, or honestly about him. He's done for. He did a terrible thing, and he should be sorry for it, and he should be sorry for it somewhere else in silence. And the same really should go for his propaganda chief, Alistair Campbell. Both of them really, I'm amazed that they both feel able to offer opinions on anything important anymore.
Do you share that view or a different view?
No, I didn't. Ad of the Tony Blair Institute. Last year, record revenues this will make your jaw drop. $140 million.
I know, it's insane.
$140 million. Big, big business. Thousands of employees. And their revenue from overseas governments increased by 50%. We're talking Bahrain, the UAE, Saudi Arabia. And so when Blair is in the Middle East, I like to say West Asia because it's a sort of bigger area that we're talking about, really. When Tony Blair is in that part of the world, I would put a question to people watching this, listening. Whose interests is he representing? Britain's? His own? The Tony Blair Institute? Because, like I say, this is somebody now who looks at conflict, government, policy as business, as an opportunity for him to get status, for his organisation to make money. And I think that's a really important way of looking at this. And also, by the way, just in addition to that, under a potential Labour government, the Tony Blair Institute may end up being the most influential think tank in this country.
Why?
Well, because the Blair Institute is just very close to the Labour right. If you were at Labour Party conference earlier this year, you would have seen a number of panels where you had...
There isn't a Labour right.
Leading member... OK, the less left-wing part of the Labour Party.
The right wing of the left wing. There is not a Labour right.
Well, I think that's...
Hasn't been for years.
I think there's a useful... Well, I think that's a useful formulation, but we can agree to disagree. The point is, there is a certain faction...
I never do that.
There is a certain faction of the Labour Party which is very close to the Tony Blair Institute, people in the shadow cabinet, and I am deeply concerned that there would be a think tank so influential over UK policy and foreign policy, which takes such extraordinary sums from overseas governments.
But there is a wider issue.
Hold on, let me just finish. Please, can I say one thing here?
One more.
Imagine if there was an organisation with $140 million revenues, and it was being funded by overseas governments, and it supported Brexit, or it supported left-wing causes. We would hear no end of it. James O'Brien on LBC would be having his daily aneurysm every day of the week. But because it's the Tony Blair Institute, nobody says anything.
Den says, Tony Blair trying to negotiate Middle Eastern peace is like putting Guy Fawkes in charge of the annual Houses of Parliament firework display. Dave says, Michelle, I can't believe you're talking about this man. He should be in the Tower for war crimes. I've got to say, are there anybody out there that actually thinks that this is quite a good scenario? Graham says, well, as long as he's not committing to the UK to things without the backing of his country or promising things beyond his remit, I have no problem with anyone trying to resolve issues and find peace. It can't hurt, and if it helps, then surely it's a win-win, says Graham. And Julie says, if Tony Blair can bring peace to the situation in the Middle East, then it is a good thing, despite what people may think of him from his past history. It's about collectively bringing to a peaceful conclusion a very different situation.
Why should anybody think that he was qualified to do that? He has. There is no reason to believe that he's qualified to do that. On the one occasion where he had to choose between peace and war, and where it was pretty obvious that an awful lot of people thought war was extremely inadvisable, he pursued with immense vigour the course of war, and that's what he favoured. And it was a war that he didn't even need to join. The Americans actually told him, it's all right. If you can't get the support of your people in your parliament, you can stay out. And he still carried on wanting to do it. This was a man who wanted war. The wider issue in this is there used to be a time when politicians, when they ended their political careers, went out of public life. In fact, when Harry Truman ceased to be President of the United States, he had nothing to live on except his army pension from the First World War. And they had to get up a special fund to create a pension for the President of the United States, who previously, I don't think, had got one. Now, every single president who goes out of office, every prime minister who goes out of office, is immediately surrounded by people waving money at them and other bodies and going around the world making speeches and becoming influential. Now, what is the actual outcome of this in politics? If someone during a political career, when they're paid a not particularly big but substantial by most people's salary for doing their job, what they're really worrying about is how much money they'll make when they leave the job, and given that most prime ministers and presidents nowadays seem to leave their jobs quite young, aren't we entitled to worry about where all this money is coming from and whether it is in fact influencing their implementation of policy and their acts in government before they get this money? They're already wondering what they're going to get in this magical world of post-office statesmanship where they all become rich. I think it's a very serious problem, and it must influence their behaviour. I think it should be examined much more closely, and actually I think it should stop.
What do you think? I mean, when we talk about ex-PMs and all the rest of it making a lot of money, I always think about Liz Truss, 40-odd days, and all of the kind of fruits that she will go on to enjoy. Anyway, back to the Middle East. You know, things really are, tensions there really are inflaming. You don't mind me saying you're part Iranian. How concerned are you about things at the moment?
I think we could be sleepwalking into something really serious. And one of the counter-histories of the last 30 years, which people don't really think about, is that, of course, we've had failed states, war across West Asia, Central Asia, bits of North Africa, but it hasn't been that big. So we've had a failed state in Libya. It's only a couple of million people. Afghanistan, very far away. Iraq, not a large country. But the prospect of a failed state in Iran or Egypt, between them, that's 200 million people. If you're worried about refugees coming to Europe, displaced people, that's a lot of people. And I think that prospect, it's not likely, but it's possible. I don't think people are alive to it. And I think there are certain politicians out there who'd be cheering on, or political figures, media figures, whatever, who'll be cheering on, let's go to war with Iran, nuke Iran. And then when you have tens of millions of people coming to Europe, which is what would happen, they would say, well, don't let them in, we've done nothing wrong. We have enough chaos, volatility in the world without having to go around causing more. And I think that we need to tread very carefully with this. That doesn't mean you do everything Iran says, but you have to start with a very simple question, which is, what is Britain's interest in West Asia? And what is our strategy? I don't know what our strategy in West Asia is, and I don't know how our interests are being represented. Right now is, the White House wants to bomb some people, we'll go bomb them too. I don't think that's good enough. And finally, you know, the United States is very lucky because it's insulated by two giant oceans. When they make screw-ups in the Middle East, Europe is the one that has to pay. The displaced people come here, the energy inflation comes here. The US is fine, they export gas to Europe, they're loving it. So these are really serious times and questions for people right across Europe, including Britain. And I think we should not write off the possibility of war. Now, I don't think we'll go to war with Iran. There is not a world war, but we are increasingly a world at war. And that's going to have serious consequences.
Do you agree?
Largely, yes. I think that's more or less right. I am astonished. I know little about the Middle East. I've travelled there a bit. I don't claim to any special knowledge, but I am absolutely astonished by the absence of knowledge, indeed positive ignorance of almost every political statement made by most political figures in the West about it. People who before Iraq didn't know the difference between a Shia and a Sunni Muslim, people who know nothing of the history of Iran. People in this country, for instance, do not know that in 1953 we overthrew the legitimate government of Iran in pursuit of our own oil interests, something which is still hugely resented there, and in my view quite rightly. And this isn't some kind of conspiracy theory fantasy. The details of it are available at the George Washington University in the American capital. The CIA have released the details of this putsch, which was organised by a man who later became a British Conservative MP, Monty Woodhouse, and by the grandson of Theodore Roosevelt, President of the United States, a man called Kermit Roosevelt, who actually arranged and organised this thing and overthrew Mohammad Mossadegh, who's Iran's legitimate prime minister, purely in pursuit of oil revenue. And this shocking thing still influences, obviously, hugely the Iranian attitude towards this country in the West. And if you don't even begin to know things like this, or that the immense resentment in Iran over what they call the imposed war, when the West encouraged Saddam Hussein to attack Iran in a war which was for them very like the First World War was for us. The cemeteries outside Iran of the war dead are appallingly huge. We just speak of Iran as a bogeyman. I don't like the rulers of Iran any more than anybody else does, but we have to remember this is a serious country with a lot of people in it who would be sympathetic to the West if they were given the chance, but whom we make enemies of.
Indeed. Let me ask you, how concerned are you about matters in the Middle East? Is it something on your radar? And to Aaron's point, what do you think the British strategy is? Do you think we have one? Have we got the right people in charge? And the next potential government, perhaps Keir Starmer, would he do a better job, in your mind, when it comes to managing foreign conflicts or not? And speaking of Labour, the Shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, she has been speaking out, saying that actually Labour is on the side of aspiration and opportunity. Yes. Is it? You, tell me.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests, and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Channel.
Hi there, Michelle Dewberry till 7, columnist for the Daily Mail, Peter Hitchens, and the co-founder of Novara Media, Aaron Bastani, alongside me. I can tell you now that Tony Blair conversation has sparked a lot of debate with you guys at home. If you were somebody who thinks, actually, what harm can Tony Blair do if he can create peace, why not let him? What do you say then to Peter's point when he was saying, well, what in Tony Blair gives you that kind of confidence that he is indeed the man to create that peace? Let me know your counter view to that. Anyway, for now, let's talk Labour, shall we? Rachel Reeves, the Shadow Chancellor, she is basically saying that it's Labour that is on the side of hard-working people, opportunity, aspiration. Apparently, they're considering things like cutting income taxes and or national insurances to prove that point. Are Labour the party for aspiration, Aaron?
I think it's the completely wrong conversation. I actually think the middle class should have a tax cut, income tax cut. I'm probably quite rare on the left for saying that.
What do you call the middle class?
Anybody between, say, 25 and 75. That's huge, isn't it?
That is cool. That is quite a broad spectrum.
That's the middle of the country. I think, broadly speaking, they are squeezed right now between high interest rates, high taxes, pensions, obviously, student loans being paid back. I think, they look at their pay packet and it's not that good.
But I'm surprised that you would say that someone that's below the average wage in this country is middle class.
Well, it depends,
are you earning 20-odd grand a year? I don't know.
No, 25. No, but you might be in an industry where they might be entering an industry where they'll be on 75 within 10 years. I mean, that's what I mean, right? So, say 35 to 75, that sort of big middle bracket, middle class professionals. What I would say is, and they are quite squeezed, the point is, well, where does the money come from? So, for instance, the Tories want to scrap the inheritance tax. You can agree or disagree with that, but the point is it's going to cost $7 billion. So where's that cash going to come from? For me, I would slightly, we've had this discussion before perhaps, I would slightly increase capital gains and I would reduce income tax and VAT. because I think that would help the real economy. I think it would help the high street and small businesses. There's debates to be had around that. However, going back to what I initially said about the party of aspiration, I think Labour, and people might not like this, I think Labour need to be thinking, I think this country is in such a sticky situation right now, they need to be thinking almost like a developing country. 2 big national missions, cheap energy, cheap housing. How are you going to do it? That matters more to me than tax cut here, this there, as much as I do think, like I say, that the middle of this country, middle Britain, should probably be paying a little bit less income tax.
Do you agree?
No. You can't cut tax significantly, any kind of tax, any amount of tax, in a way which will affect most people unless you cut spending. And to cut spending, you have to change fundamentally the policies of the government. To some extent, you can't cut it at all for a very long time because so much spending is actually, if people realise this, they get very angry if they realise when their money came out of their wage packet with PAYE that a lot of it was going to pay interest on government debt. They would get so cross that they probably wouldn't pay. But people, by and large, are unaware of where their money is going. But there's so much of our money is going on that at the moment, it's quite shocking. The size of the welfare state, and a lot of that is things which people support, such as old age pensions, is gigantic and swallows up the entire product of the income tax without any difficulty at all. You've then got things like VAT and fuel duty and the other things which feed into the national insurance, which is a tax in everything but name. These things are colossal because the spending of government on every aspect of life is colossal. And one of the reasons for this is we've gone for a series of policies which require those levels of spending, particularly the replacement of the married family by the state in all kinds of areas of life. And also the decision that we would have a directly central government financed health service and make a religion of it. We do these things and we have to pay for them. Unless you have several fundamental and quite shocking changes in the way in which we spend money, you can't reduce tax in a significant... Every time a allegedly Conservative government comes to office and says, we're going to cut tax, I say, well, how are you going to cut it unless you change policies? And in fact, they don't. They cut one tax. The basic rate of income tax is now virtually frozen. But what do? They create the higher rate of income tax, which used to be imposed on really quite well-off people, now kicks in the incomes of far from well-off people. And this happens all the time through what's called fiscal drag. Tax rates which were designed for rich people are now imposed on the middle class and end up even being imposed on actually poor people. It's grotesque to talk of tax cuts if you won't discuss spending cuts. And if you're going to discuss spending cuts, you have to be very honest about what it is you're going to stop doing that we now do, because you don't have all that much room for manoeuvre, especially given the huge debts on which we have to pay quite high interest now.
Yeah, it's very peculiar when I hear, I think we've got ourselves in such a muddle right now in terms of what was traditionally Labour, what was traditionally the Tories. When you've got the Labour Party saying, right, it's us, we're going to be the ones that's going to actually cut your taxes, we're going to be the ones that stand for aspiration and all the rest of it, and then you've got the Tories that are hiking taxes, or like you say, pulling more people into the higher tax bands with their thresholds. It's all gone kind of sixes and sevens. Do you think those traditional definitions of what the two parties are supposed to be, is that for the birds now?
Oh, I think they've converged into the sort of uni party, and I think depending sort of which month it is, they say things that do surprise you. On the aspiration thing, if I look at my paycheck at the end of the month, a lot goes into my pension. Good, I'm going to need that one day. A lot goes into student loans, and then I look at my mortgage. Obviously, interest rate hikes have really hit me. We've got a young child. Childcare is very expensive. So, there are so many things which are very expensive. Childcare, energy, housing, student loans. It's like what the Tories did earlier this year, or at the beginning of this year. It's still yet to come, of course. The national insurance contributions, I think, if you're on about £30,000 a year, you'll be paying around £30 a month less. Sounds great until you realise the same person's paying £500 a month more on their mortgage. So I think just this emphasis on tax, if we're going to talk about aspiration, people doing well, energy, housing, childcare, all has to come into it. And finally, Peter's right to say that there are so many challenges, it can look overwhelming. That's why I think a government should really just focus on 2 or 3 things. I believe in public ownership, but actually if Labour came in and said, we're just going to bring rail into public ownership and we're going to do it really well, I'd be very happy.
Well, I'll tell you who is happy at the moment. One of my viewers, Mark, he says, Peter Hitchens, you are my big friendly giant. When you speak, I listen. You hug me with every single word. That's what Mark says. Philip's also happy. He says, your two guests tonight are absolutely wonderfully knowledgeable. I am in awe of them both.
Oh, bless you.
There you go. You're making the viewers across the nation very happy tonight, gents. I appreciate it. Now, after the break, I'll tell you what's not making you guys happy. The post office scandal. Have you been watching that drama? The worst part of it is it's based on a true story. People, the sub-postmasters, had their lives absolutely destroyed. Let me ask you a simple question. Do you think anyone truly is being held accountable for what was done to those people? If not, what should happen next? You tell me.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 o'clock, columnist for the Daily Mail, Peter Hitchens, and the co-founder of Novara Media, Aaron Bastani, alongside me. Right, let me ask you this. Have you been spending your evenings watching that drama series on ITV about the post office, the IT scandal, which is, of course, the Horizon system? I've been watching it, and it's absolutely mind-blowing that those kind of things could have happened in recent years in this country. You'll be familiar, perhaps, with the story, I am sure. So many now innocent, I have to stress that word, sub-postmasters. They were basically having ran their post offices for many, many years in cases, you know, healthy bank balances. All of a sudden, they had this IT system installed, and then it was basically them finding themselves accused of theft, fraud, false accounting, you name it. There were people chucked into prison. There was one lady on the first episode, you might have seen that story. She was subjected to electric shock system.
Oh, it's terrible.
It was just absolutely scandalous. People lost their marriages, they lost their sanity in some cases, they went bankrupt. As I said, they were sent to prison. You've been watching this, Peter. What do you make to all this?
I think it is probably the best television I've seen for several years. It's partly because it is so beautifully done and so beautifully acted and casted and so convincing, and also because it's absolutely true. And what it reveals is that this hideous thing which was done to innocent people by a gigantic corporation is still, in my view, unresolved. It's probably impossible to provide restitution for the things which were done to these people, the ruination of their lives, the destruction of their reputations, the years eaten by the locusts, the general wreckage which was done by, I don't know for what reason, but we do know it was done. But seeing it in this form and acted in this superb way by people who really put their back into it, beautifully scripted as well, it's made very easy for the rest of us to see that there is something remaining to be done here. I found myself becoming quite angry on several occasions and thinking, surely somebody should pay for this. And I'm not generally much of a vengeance person.
Yeah, I was going to say, that surprises me.
Not for more than a few minutes, but on this occasion, I really do feel that somebody, I don't know who, I'm not suggesting who, but somebody ought to pay for this in some important way, because it cannot be. No major corporation or power or government should ever think in future that they could treat people like this and get away with it.
Well, Paula Venel, she actually got, was it a CBE? Was it a CBE she got?
I can't remember, but people...
she did.
I'm not going to necessarily... In parts of it that I've seen, she actually comes out of it better than I had thought that she would. But there was something going on here in which people who were doing an honest job were put into a position of terrible disgrace and danger and ruin. And those people who should have helped them get out of it did the opposite.
Aaron?
I've not had the pleasure of watching this yet.
Well, you know the story,
It's good.
Right?
Yeah, I'm very familiar with it as a news story, I should be clear, yeah. It's good to see something that's being produced by ITV doing so well, rather than Netflix and Apple TV and whatnot. Peter was saying, somebody should be to blame here. I think what's quite clear is that you have auditors whose responsibility is to ensure that the facts are the facts, who didn't ask a simple question, which is to say, is this IT system capable of being wrong? Yes or no?
All the IT systems are capable of being wrong. All of them. That's what I used to do for a living. I used to do business transformation centred around IT systems. All of them have it in them.
And obviously this question was raised implicitly and explicitly. And auditors don't seem to have countenanced that possibility. You also have certain instances of people, signing witness statements in regards to individuals affected by this, making the individual's claim erroneous assertions to cover their tracks, to set an example, because they didn't want to accept the possibility that the IT system itself was at fault. So I think the auditors have big questions to answer. Of course, when they've been asked, they say they can't recount this or that, or they can't recall a particular instance of something. But I think, look, this is what auditors exist for. Something has clearly gone wrong, and if somebody's to blame, I think they should give an explanation as to why it's not them.
Lots of you getting in touch on this one. Dean says, Michelle, you're asking what should happen next. The bosses at the post office at the time should be in jail, he says. He says that might go some way to making it better. Paul says, please, can you make a point, Michelle, that many feelings are running high about the post office, but please, can you ask that people don't randomly start boycotting their local post office? That would make, surely...
As if they've got one.
Well, yeah, good point, actually. Ours are just closed down, actually. Yes, Steve says, Michelle, you're right. Paula was given a CBE in the honours list. It should be withdrawn as the very least that should happen. One of my viewers as well, Richard, he's just got in touch with me, interestingly enough. It says that he was a sub-postmaster for 15 years, and he says he can confirm, having watched that documentary, the drama, sorry, that it is absolutely accurate. Yep. He says, I remember watching the parliamentary inquiry in 2015 and absolutely seething. Many people, Richard again, a different Richard, saying that Mr Bates should be knighted. What about Ed Davey, says Alex? Why hasn't he been held accountable? I mean, so many people here. The inquiry, hopefully, will find people guilty of criminality.
There's a thing, Michelle, which for those of us who've watched it will remember, which is what was repeatedly said to those who complained, you're the only one who's complaining.
Yeah.
And We get this. Anyone who's ever been in any kind of tussle with a large corporation or an official body will have been told this by somebody. My late brother always had a tremendous response to that when anybody told him. He said, well, you won't be able to say that again now, will you? And it's true, but it's also, it's almost invariably a lie when you're told it. And I think if there's one thing that anybody who sees this will learn from it is that they may well not be the only person who's being treated in this fashion, and therefore they should seek help. And now, actually, one of the advantages of the internet is that they can.
Yeah.
These people didn't really have it.
There's a word for some of this stuff, gaslighting, isn't it? And if actually, when you listen to some of these people's stories, they were literally going around the bend because they knew that they were good, honest, decent citizens. You tell me, what do you think should happen next? The stripping of Paula Vennell's honour is something that's coming through thick and fast from you guys. I'll let you ponder it for tonight. Aaron, thank you very much for your company. Peter, for yours too. Viewers have very much enjoyed it tonight. Have a good evening. Don't go anywhere. Nigel Farage up next in the night.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Tomorrow, for most places, a dry and a bright day. A few scattered showers, but the potential for some very wet weather across the far south. Storm Henk is disappearing away to the east, but this little weather front is going to generate some wet weather across the south tomorrow. Still got low pressure up to the north of Scotland as well. Plenty of showers packing in here this evening. Quite a wet evening across eastern Scotland, but elsewhere the weather is turning a bit drier. Plenty of showers still across northwest England. Of course, any extra rain falling because it's been so wet could cause some further issues. Temperatures mostly holding up a few degrees above freezing. Bright start then across the Midlands, South Wales, and indeed the southeast of England too. Elsewhere, quite a bit of clouds, some showers still over northwest England and northern parts of Scotland. But down to the south, we are looking at this next area of rain coming in. Some uncertainty about how quickly it gets in, but parts of Devon and Somerset may well turn wet by lunchtime, and then that rain likely to spread up towards the southeast during the day. Could be quite heavy. And of course, again, because it's falling onto saturated ground, likely to cause some issues. It may be a little bit further north, it may be a little bit further south. For many, though, it stays dry and bright through Thursday with some sunny spells, temperatures a little above average. That rain should scoot away on Friday, then we're left with a few showers, but the weather is turning drier and calmer through the weekend, but also a bit colder. Goodbye.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.